Hello, and welcome back to the Let's Talk Universal podcast, sponsored by the UWI, a social enterprise committed to making the workforce better for everyone. And in this episode, I'm joined by Katherine McCord, CPO of Titan Management, speaker and educator on inclusion, people operations, and HR tech. Welcome, Katherine. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so very much for having me. And I think that is the best articulation of what it is that I do in the history of my introduction. So I think I might steal that going forward.
You are more than welcome to it. Well, thanks again. I think perhaps we should just start by telling us a little bit about who you are and how you kind of became involved in diversity and inclusion.
Yeah, so actually, it does tend to surprise people that even though I am wildly diverse, and the ones that I talk about the most are my physical and neurodiversities, which I have plenty of. I have 6 invisible disabilities. My doctor keeps trying to add more diagnoses to that, and I've cut her off. I'm like, no, ma'am, 6 is the max. This is it. This is all we're allowed to have. And I talk about that quite a bit. And for anybody who doesn't know, neurodiversity just means a medically visible and or diagnosable difference in how the brain processes information and stimuli. That's all that means. Anything from like cerebral palsy and traumatic brain injury all the way over to like obsessive compulsive disorder and autism. Broad spectrum. So I'm definitely on that spectrum, have been my entire life. I was born with the OCD. It did not develop. That manifested extremely early on, and then I didn't get into inclusion that way. I broke into recruiting during my career, and then I broke into HR consulting, and the inclusion part just kept coming up because I kept seeing just really messed up stuff that happened, like just stuff that you're going, what? Like, there's no way that's real, right?
Yeah.
And then all the way to just processes that just didn't make sense, that were obviously problems for people. And so there were the very intentional things and then the very unintentional, but it was just a hot mess, honestly. So I decided, okay, my joy in life is fixing problems. So I just decided to dive on in.
Wow, yeah, it's funny how you kind of fall into a career, isn't it? But
yeah.
But I think with your background as a neurodiverse or neurodivergent individual, I suppose it does lend itself to having a different perspective to people that are already kind of within an organization and entrenched in how that organization works and thinks.
Oh yes. Oh yeah. It's a really interesting experience to go into a group, and I think a lot of people can relate to this, to go into a group and have them just not have any idea, like, and not even have you on their radar ultimately. Like, I've spoken to some Black women in my industry that have had this type of experience. I've spoken to other people in the disability community, people with socioeconomic background. A lot of times, like, that's just nowhere on the radar in inclusion, and so it's really interesting to have those conversations and to realize how often we're just not thinking outside of ourselves when we design and develop things. So one of the things that I started teaching really early on, started implementing first. First, I implemented it, made sure this actually worked. Then I started teaching it. And that is that when you're designing anything, policies, procedures, products, processes, whatever it is, then first of all, you start with the humans. Don't start with the legality. So like with ADA, a lot of times you'll hear people say, oh, well, we based our policy on accommodations on the American Disabilities Act here in America, or whatever it is, wherever you are. And I go, well, that's completely backwards, isn't it? But you didn't focus on the humans for a human-centric process, right? So you want to start with the humans, and then just make sure, that should just be a checkbox. Like, okay, by the way, yeah, we also are legally compliant. But when you focus on the humanity and you focus on the people and you get their feedback, and that's the other thing, you can't have inclusion if you're not including other people. That makes no sense. Like, it baffles me that other people like just are mind blown by this when I say it. Is I go into companies and they're like, oh yeah, we've designed all these inclusive processes. Great. How many people did you talk to? And they're like, everybody in this room. I'm like, there's 3 of you and you have a company of 1,000 people. Like, what are the odds that this is actually fully inclusive? So you have to start by focusing on the people. Then you have to talk to the people. Like, first, just kind of start with it. Like, who do we need to talk to, right? Like, who is this going to involve? Who do we need to find? You figure that out. You talk to the people. You implement all of their feedback in some way, shape, or form, and then you move forward. And what you'll find is that works.
Yeah, and I think it's that kind of co-creation, co-ideation that helps to push those initiatives forward. And let's just kind of frame where Titan Management kind of fits into that. So what is it that Titan Management does and helps companies with?
So we do nonlinear people work. So I always tell people, if you want the basic cookie cutter, literally everybody's doing it, standard nonsense, we are not for you. Right. We do the nonlinear. I innovate hiring processes. We have a very hands-on, innovative, human-centric, research-based approach to inclusion. We also have KPIs and metrics associated with inclusion efforts at companies. We come in and really revamp how the employee relations works, that type of thing. And it's a very personal, interaction. I get to know all my clients. All of my solutions are different for every single company based on what they need, what they have going on. So it's a very nonlinear process. It's not just people go, what can I expect? And I go, well, I can give you a very basic outline of what you're going to get. And I can tell you what it's like to work with me personally and to work with my team. But outside of that, I don't know, because I don't know you that well yet. And so that's what we do with the nonlinear and really pushing the world of HR forward.
Yeah. And you mentioned kind of the KPIs and the measurement of that. Now, you don't have to go into too much detail and give all your secrets away, but what kind of things should companies be looking at in terms of measuring inclusion?
Oh, I don't mind sharing that at all. And actually, thank you for that question, because this is something that I think has been shooting a lot of DEI folks in the foot, because a lot of people that get into diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's because they're mushes, right? Like they have the emotional, sweet, sensitive personalities typically, and they just want, they're helpers, right? That's what their focus is. And they don't think about the back end and all that. They're like, I'm out here doing the work, but you do need to have, when you're in a business, you do need to have a business aspect. And even out in life and politics and all, we need to measure these types of things to make sure we're actually being successful. So in a company, a few of the things that you want to measure are employee satisfaction and retention. That should be going up with your inclusion efforts. Productivity should be going up. If you're not seeing productivity increasing, something is still off and something still needs to be tweaked. So there needs to be measurable productivity. There should be an influx of creative suggestion, psychological safety. There's a few metrics kind of within the psychological safety umbrella, but like creation and that kind of thing. A lot more people speaking up, telling you when you're wrong. How much feedback are you getting saying that you're wrong? That's actually a very positive measurable. And then the other thing is, another big one that a lot of people miss is that your time to hire shrinks, but also the number of candidate referrals comes way up. So when you're in a fully inclusive company, people are happy and healthy and all of that type of thing, you will start to see a lot more people sending their friends and other people that they've worked with to come work for you. So those are just a few. It's a kind of big umbrella, but there's different ones for different departments, but those are kind of a few of the top ones that you should definitely see improvement in.
And it's also, I guess, the ROI for organizations. The return is on kind of building inclusive cultures, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's the increased productivity, increased efficiency, increased creativity and innovation, higher retention, which then also lowers, and then you'll also have lower cost to hire. But then the ultimate awesome thing is that you're eventually going to have your actual profits go up, and by an average of about 19%. That was based on a study done by Boston Consulting Group, and I found that to be about true, somewhere around the like 17 to 20% mark. People will have their profits go up, and that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, if organizational leaders don't want increased profits, then what are they doing?
Yeah, I don't think they're doing it right at that point. I really don't. I think they've missed the mark at that point.
Yes. Yeah. I think it almost feels as if D&I has become this kind of do-gooder, as you said, like almost softy kind of role, whereas actually the reality is that it could really help to achieve organizational outcomes. So
yes. Yeah, and it's based on simple science. Humans are more productive when they're comfortable, healthy, and happy. And it's the same thing for the body as it is for the mind. So when the mind is comfortable and safe, it's allowed to have it moves that functionality that it was using to keep itself safe out into the other parts of the brain. And so it's just common science, really, just very basic science as to why this works. But I've seen it happen time and time again. It really is a powerful thing to watch happen.
And what do you think is kind of the main challenge that organizations face when it comes to making these changes?
Ego, 100%. And I don't mean like, I think I'm the best, you can't tell me different, blah, blah, blah. I mean, sometimes that's it. But honestly, a lot of times it's a lot more primitive than that. So we all are born with an inherent ego mechanism in the brain. You can research this on Google. It's a very fascinating read. And what that ego mechanism does is anytime that we receive information that's contrary to what we believe or think or what we've experienced, the brain throws up defenses as to why we're right. And that's to keep us safe. There's a reason that that's there, but it's also not very helpful as we get older. That's kind of better for back in the day and like, cave people type days, and then also when we're little children. But as we get older, that's just not really as productive. So what you want to do is, instead of responding in ego, respond in curiosity. And ego can be as simple as, well, I haven't heard of it, so it must not be real, kind of a thing, or that doesn't make sense to me, so it must not be real. Well, you don't represent the whole human experience. So calm down a little bit, and listen to the other person. So it really is, it's that simple. It's ego. You just have to learn to break that and say, no, thank you, brain, I'm safe. And then respond with questions. And that's how you start to do that, is you start to respond with questions, not with answers.
Right. And it's that kind of two-way dialogue then, isn't it? It's less of a command and control situation. It is more collaborative, and it's building trust. It's building, all those great things as well.
Absolutely. And it's fascinating too. I think that a lot of the reason actually that people have trouble breaking their ego mechanism is not so much quieting the ego itself, but the fear of asking the questions. Because when you ask questions and you go into it really truly wanting to learn and to grow, that is about as vulnerable as you can be with another person, because you're saying, I'm going to allow your information to change my neuro pathways. And what is more intimate than that, than saying, hey, I'm just going to let you crawl up inside my brain and change all this. And you're not saying that you're necessarily going to change your mind, but that information that you receive will change how you process. It'll eliminate some biases. It may create some biases. It may teach you a new way to behave. It may teach you a new way to process, may give you more information on which to base decisions. But this information that you're going to receive is going to change your neuro pathways. And that is incredibly frightening. And when you stop and think about it, if you haven't practiced it. And so I think that primitively, I don't think it's conscious, but I think primitively we go, we kind of squinch up whenever we're thinking about doing that. So I think that's a huge piece of the puzzle.
And one of the other things that you talk about is building symbiotic working relationships. Yeah. Could you tell us a little bit more about what that is and why it's important?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the prime examples of that was when Hewlett Packard created their neurodiverse cultivation program, which increased productivity 33%, by the way. Fascinating program. And they just allowed everybody to work naturally, in a way that was just completely natural to them, whatever that meant, and use tools that worked for them, so on and so forth. And one of the things that they had was the symbiotic relationships. It's something that I have formed multiple times over. And actually, people that are in the neurodiverse, neurodivergent communities, they tend to naturally gravitate towards that type of relationship, I found. And what that simply means is that you get several people, and it's typically 2 to 4 people that come together cohesively, forming one working unit. So, for instance, in one of my symbiotic relationships or symbiotic work cells, I had a gentleman who had trained me, and he was terrible at keeping himself organized and getting like the basic tasks done and, charging through all of that. But he was really good at talking to people who were hostile. Well, at that time, young Catherine was not very good with hostile people and would just basically just tell them to get over themselves. So what we did and we were in an industry where people were very emotionally heightened because we were helping them with their finances. So they would get very sensitive and understandably so. So we swapped, and he would take those calls from me, and I would take all of these, forms and all of this from him. And we kept that cell going. Then we added in another piece that came in, and we all just kind of started doing that. So all of the work got done. It was just done as a cohesive cell, and we all worked on our weaknesses, but we also had the support to know that that part of the job wouldn't get dropped.
Sure. I think it's great for people to be able to take a role that they've been kind of given and to carve out their own kind of version of that, and then within a team be able to go, okay, so that piece doesn't really work for you, that's fine, it works for this person, and to be able to pass those things around is once again allowing people to, and I think the not famous, but the popular phrase right now is bring your whole self to work.
Right. Right. And that also bugs me too. I'm like, please stop saying that to people and obligating them to that. Like, just please stop. It's, people are allowed to have a part of them that's private. So please stop saying that. It's okay. Inclusion does not mean that you need to be all up in people's business. Yeah. It really, it is a beautiful relationship. And as long as the work gets done, that's what matters. I've had so many leaders over the years say to me, well, they can't work here if they can't do everything, every aspect of the job. I said, okay, all right. So this person over here, who's a salesperson, is really great on the phone, but cannot get their reports done for squat. So why are they still here? Well, because they're really great at sales, and it was like, so see, you don't need to have all the skills. You just need somebody else who can help you. So you got them a sales assistant to help with that, didn't you? Yes. All right, then. And you don't necessarily have to have a whole other hire, to accommodate one person, but it's just, as long as you allow for people to work together. And you talk about team, like everybody's, how do you build a team? How do you build a team? Symbiotic work cells solves the problem.
And can I ask you about management as well? What kind of management skills is then needed to kind of help to build and to sustain that symbiotic working cell?
The ability to break the ego defense and respond in curiosity is big. The ability to be vulnerable. And I want to put this out there. This was not natural for me at all. This is something I very much had to learn. So for anybody listening that's like, well, that's just not me. BS, it can be. You just have to work on it. And you have to kind of, show your underbelly, so to speak, and let people get in. And that helps your staff then be able to do that back with you, and to be able to communicate their needs, and to be able to do that with each other. So one of the things that I tell a lot of leaders to do is to start, different meetings with something vulnerable. When you meet somebody, share something vulnerable about yourself, because it decompresses them and creates a very psychologically safe environment. Another thing is the ability to communicate in different styles. So, and to understand that people have different communication needs. So I'm very visual. So if you send me an email, that's the best thing that you could ever do for me. That's fantastic. I'm visual / kinetic. So that's what I need. Other people need phone calls because they're auditory, or voicemails or something like that. They need auditory. Some people need the kinetic. So you have to be able to teach, train, and mentor all with those different skills. And luckily now there's tools for that, right? Like there's starting to be some great tools. Storied, for anyone listening, is a great one. You go to bstoried.ai, and I think, and you still get a free trial. Fantastic product. And it helps take auditory communication into organized written communication. And so we have tools to help us with that, but that's an absolutely mandatory skill for leaders.
No, that's really fascinating, because when you say that, it's like, well, actually, from my own personal kind of work and managing my own team, are there other things that I could be doing for my team, such as voice notes and other ways of communicating things? So no, I think that's something that a lot of people will actually go away and consider is am I actually doing all I can to be a good manager and a good leader for my team? So I think that's really insightful. I just want to go back for a second to Titan Management. So what sort of services do you then provide for organizations? Is it workshops? Is it training?
Oh, all over the place. So I do, for any size company, I do workshops and training on how to master these skills, taking you through creating inclusive hiring processes, understanding neurodiversity. There's a range of different classes that I provide. I can do them on site or virtually. So that's on the education page. I spend a lot of my time doing that these days. Actually, it's a lot of fun. And then we also offer what I call HR in the box, out of the box, HR in a box, out of the box, because it's building HR from the ground up. So getting really cool, nonlinear, inclusive HR that's very sustainable in this world, and taking that and building that out for a company. And that's more geared towards startups and growth stage. But I have occasionally had larger companies ask me if I would consider coming in and revamping everything that they did. They decided they weren't ready for anything that radical ultimately, but I would be open to that. So that's what we do. And then also we still do recruiting as well. So if somebody just needs help with hiring, everything from mass hire events for entry level and repetitive roles. So things like, I need 10 Java developers, we can do a mass hire event. Or I need 20 truck drivers, we can do a mass hire event. All the way up to retained search and contingency as well.
Great. That's rather a lot there, isn't there?
It is, yeah.
But of course, this isn't the only thing that you're doing. You're also the president of the board of the Octopus Movement, which, as I understand it, now feel free to correct me, is a global coalition of like-minded people who want to help make positive change happen in the world. Now,
that's a pretty good description. I would add that there's a very strong nonlinear and or neurodivergent aspect, but yeah, no, that was pretty bang on, actually. Good.
Good. So I suppose for our listeners, I'd like to kind of hear a little bit more about what the organization does and what change is it looking to achieve.
Right. That's fantastic. So the original founder is in the Netherlands, so over in Europe, and that's sort of where the Octopus Movement got its legs. But then there's just this huge, outpouring in the U.S. and this huge adoption of it in the U.S. So we decided to bring it officially to the U.S. We are literally just now filing the 501c3, and we've formed the board, and we've been having board meetings, and we're really getting that up and running. And we are very much focused on creating a world in which the nonlinear thrives. So for millennia now, the nonlinear has been kind of pushed down and smushed down. And so we want to create a world in which the nonlinear thrive. And so everything that means. So, we're going to be having, resource help, for people that want help with education, that need help with mental health, anything like that. So there will be that aspect. There's a strong sense of community. We all, interact with each other. There's an employment aspect. So we have already a site called Pick My Neurodiverse Brain. That's a spawn off of another organization, and people can put themselves up there, and companies or individuals can hire them for their expertise in short bursts or long bursts or long-term projects as well, which is really cool. So we have that. There's an art book coming out with a bunch of the octopuses in it. And then we are going to be having a large event in New York next year that's going to be a big sort of welcome to the world of the octopus sort of event that mixes like the kind of a cool tech convention, hybrid with like the coolest Christmas winter wonderland you've ever seen, like that kind of emotion to it,
Yeah.
So it's going to be really cool. Yeah.
That sounds incredible. And
I
wondered if you could tell us what the relevance of the octopus is.
Yeah, so the octopus is really cool. And everybody knows about the 8 arms, right? But a lot of people don't know that they have multiple brains and multiple hearts as well. And so when Perry was founding this several years ago, he thought, well, what better creature to represent this nonlinear population than the octopus? And so that's how it came into being. Now everybody just kind of rolls with it.
It's great. It's great. I think everyone loves a mascot, don't they?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
So for people who want to get involved in the octopus movement, what do they do? What is available to them?
They can go to the Facebook page and connect there. They can connect with Perry or I on LinkedIn, and we'll help them kind of get roped into anything they want to be in. They can also go to the website and sign up to become a founding member or to just, receive newsletters, whatever level of connectivity they want. And we're actually about to expand on that. I'm not supposed to talk about it yet, but we're just about to expand to have all new levels of involvement and kind of some different pathways. If people want to get super involved, there's going to be specific like pathways they can take for like education or to learn more about the community. So yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. So the website, social media would be the easiest way.
Sounds great. And hopefully there are some people that do kind of from this podcast, see the potential and get involved. But let's take it back to the organizations just for a minute.
Yeah.
So for organizations who are looking to take that first step towards inclusion, and I think we've briefly touched on it, but I kind of want to make it, put it into some bullet points, is
Sure.
what would those first steps be for them in terms of that journey towards inclusion?
First, accept that you are going to be changing a lot. Just steer into it. Like things that you never thought would apply to diversity and inclusion, you're going to have to change. It may mean getting new technology. It may mean updating your technology. It may mean having new policies and procedures. It may mean that you have to change some verbiage that you use. It's a very broad spectrum, so you need to be flexible and also understand, like we talked about earlier, that it's an ongoing journey. It's just an eternal journey. You and I said that before the show, that it's just a constant flexibility. So going into it with that mentality is important. If you don't have that mentality, it's going to fail. Then get you an expert that's a broad scope expert. A lot of times I've watched companies make a mistake of getting someone who's really got an expertise or just is really, really good at one little area of DE&I, and they try to put them over the whole program. That doesn't work. You need somebody with an executive mindset that's going to oversee the whole thing. And then you can also hire the experts or bring them in periodically as needed. And then you want to talk to the humans. Talk to the humans, not just the ones in your company. Use your customers. Get on social. Have paid focus groups, unpaid focus groups, whatever you want to do. Get feedback anonymously, get it directly, get different formats, and reach out to every diversity that you can find, multiple people in it, and kind of start there. Like, and have them look at different policies and procedures, have them look at talk to you about different ways that you handle things, different mentalities you have, and just kind of process it, find out what their experiences have been in applying for jobs, workplace, these types of things, and just roll from there. And then my last piece of advice is just go ahead and make accommodation standard options. That's one of the things that Hewlett Packard did in that program that I talked about earlier, where they saw the massive increase in productivity and also more employee satisfaction. Just make it standard options. A huge percentage of your workforce, about a third, give or take, could benefit from some form of accommodation. So why not just have them as standard options and then just have a fill in the blank? Plus, that also tells people, hey, we actually care enough to have thought through this, And one thing that people miss too, that makes having the list so very important, is that a lot of people in the disability community have not been taught to take care of themselves. They've been specifically taught to harm themselves and to do things that are not natural to them, to do things that cause them stress, do things that shut down their productivity, and sometimes even things that hurt their bodies. And that's not okay. So what we can do is say, they know they need something, they just don't know what. So if you put a list up, even if you don't have the exact thing, it'll spawn the thought of, oh, this would be a thing that would actually be helpful. And then they can ask you for it. So for so many reasons, make accommodations into standard options.
And I think as well, there's also this need to recognize that we talk a lot about changing mindset and culture in businesses and in organizations, but there is also a need to change the mindset and behaviors of, the people who have been told that they're not good enough,
Yes.
either in education or, throughout their life, or they're not able to do something because of their disability or for, the way that they think and their character. So really there's two sides to this, isn't there? It's not just, organizations need to change, but it's also how can they help balance that scale and help to change the mindsets of the workers.
Oh, yeah. And I don't ever expect leadership in an organization to be counselors, right? That's not their job. And that's not what I'm saying. I don't expect them to be physicians. But you can and should participate, because if you're in leadership and if you're in HR, that is your job, is to take care of the humans. Like it or not, that is your job. So you do need to have a good attitude about that and to support them. The other thing is, on the employee side, is, folks, you have to start self-advocating. I know it's scary. I know you've not been taught to do that, but we've got to start kind of coming out of the woodworks with this and just speaking up and just saying as a statement, not asking for, just saying as a statement, this is what I need. That's it.
Yeah.
And just making it very simple. And then it makes a big difference. That's what I started doing at one point, is I didn't ask. I would just say, this is what I need. And I figured out I got what I needed a lot more. Like if I just made it a statement, people were just like, oh, okay. Like she must really mean it,
Lastly, I just wanted to get your opinion on sort of employee resource groups or business resource groups, however they're named.
Right.
Because there are a lot of organizations that are running these groups, but they're employee led. I just wondered what your perspective was on that, on where the responsibility was in making, neuro inclusion or people with disabilities feel, included in a workforce.
So I have mixed feelings on the ERGs, and I've seen them used positively and I've seen them used negatively, and I've seen very bizarre mixtures of both. So first of all, everything has to start at the top, period. So executives, you don't get out of this. Leadership, you don't get out of it. HR, you don't get out of this. Yes, employee resource groups can be very beneficial, but you absolutely still need to be heavily involved all the time. Employee resource groups, to me, are terrific when used appropriately. And to me, that looks like that they are gathering data, number one, right? So they can be a great source of, oh, hey, this is something we've missed in our inclusion efforts. Hey, just so you know, because people in a group of others like them are a lot more likely to be honest, right? And especially if there's not a leader present, they'll be a lot more likely to be forthcoming. So to use for feedback, to use for a sense of community, and to use for a sense of psychological safety, because especially in marginalized groups, and depending on where you are geographically, there may be some areas where people have even been in danger before. And so getting them to come out of their shell is going to take a sense of community. So I think from that standpoint, they're wonderful. But companies who think that that's their DE&I effort, I'm like, no. Not even close. That is not the thing.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that, because I as well am kind of in that, is this useful? Is it just kind of taking the responsibility away from organizational leaders and, the people who are at the top and making a lot of decisions? But before we finish, is there anything that we haven't covered or something that you'd like to kind of raise now?
Yeah, actually, I would. And thank you for asking. So this idea that certain people don't belong in inclusion, or that inclusion doesn't matter for them, is incredibly, inherently incorrect. So inclusion cannot be exclusive. It's not possible. Those are antonyms. They are opposites. So if you're going to be inclusive, you cannot be exclusive of anybody at all. So I've had organizations say, well, we're inclusive, but we don't hire LGBTQ. Well, no, then you're not inclusive. Stop saying that. And there has been this very antagonistic approach to inclusion work. And some of it I understand, because some of it comes from a place of pain. And I get that. I do. I completely understand it. But for an organization out there, or someone who's going to lead the DE&I efforts, or just really be a major part of perpetuating them, it's important to remember that that does not accomplish anything. That yes, there's a place for anger. There's a place to share pain. Another great thing about ERGs, a place to share pain. Occasionally having somebody come in and tell their story that has, that starts with the pain and ends with the positive, that can have its point. But understand that people will not learn from you if you put them in a place of pain. And whether that's defensive, whether that's feeling excluded, whether it's feeling guilty, which may even be earned, okay? But they're still not going to learn while they're in that mindset. So sometimes we have to step outside of our emotions and getting what we need out of a situation and focus on the overall mission, which is really hard to do sometimes. There are days it's so easy for me, and then there are days that it's just almost impossible. And I have had a few fails along the way with that. But, and give yourself some grace, but your overall mission should be to get people on board, to have them understand inclusion, and to further and evolve inclusion. That's it. And I think keeping that focus is one of the greatest messages that I'm trying to get out to my fellow folks who work in inclusion, because it's being missed horribly right now.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think, as you say, it's something that people forget about inclusion. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. It's been really interesting, super insightful, and as it always is. So I look forward to seeing more from you in the Octopus movement and Titan management.
Thank you so very much for having me, Erica. It's been a pleasure.
You too. Thanks. Bye.